Mainstream mental health is flawed, and I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm Andrea Clark, a former family therapist who walked away from the system to expose the truth. After my own journey from medication maze to holistic healing, I'm here to challenge the status quo and reveal the mental health truths most people don't know. The truth about mental health is your radical roadmap to wellness. Raw stories, expert insights, breakthrough solutions. This is where traditional modalities end and real healing begins. Hey, you guys. It's Andrea Clark back with another solo episode. I'm really excited. I decided to do this episode from inspiration. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm looking at my computer because I have notes here. So just FYI. I was inspired to do this episode because I made a reel the other day that got some pretty significant traction and it upset some people. I knew that it would, and that wasn't my purpose, but in the interactions with a few of the people commenting on my reel, one of the therapists ended up saying something that made me feel like, duh, this is the point of the reel. And I decided that, sometimes these concepts and these things that I want to share about are too complex for a reel or an Instagram story or even a carousel post. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make an episode about this. It's the whole point of having this podcast is being able to really take a deep dive. So the hook of the reel was your therapist can't say what really heals you because insurance won't cover it. And then I went into some different reasons why that is. The first thing that I shared was that therapists, once they're licensed, they're really handcuffed by their licensing body, right? Their board of ethics. And let me just say this, the board of ethics and the licensing bodies are important, okay? They protect clients. They protect the abuse of power. These are very important things to have in place for anybody practicing like that. Doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, because when you enter into a relationship where you're going to be treated for something, right? Or to be supported in some version of a healing journey, those people end up having a lot of authority and weight in your life. People give professionals in this capacity a lot of authority and weight. And there are individuals who abuse that power. There's some humans that are inherently ill-willed, right? Have ill will intention and they abuse their power. Okay. And that's why these licensing bodies are in place. Something that I wanted to share though was that I personally feel that these licensing bodies can take things too far and can very easily deem a lot of things out of scope of practice. I struggle with that because as you grow as a professional and a human being, you gain knowledge, you gain wisdom, you gain experience, continuing education credits that we have to take every year for our licenses. I, for example, took a lot of continuing education credits in functional medicine for mental health. I also have a mental wellness certification that includes herbs, nutrition, movement, and supplementation for mental health. I have certifications, but often even certifications can be deemed out of scope of what a therapist can do. And I actually have a huge problem with that because mental health is not one thing. And quite frankly, mental health is not what I learned in grad school. It's a piece of it, right? And I'm trained as a family therapist, so I learned something very different than many other mental health disciplines. The family therapy lens is the most holistic systemic lens that you can be trained in. Social workers, counselors, they're all trained through a symptom-specific, individual-specific lens, which I'm staunchly against because that's not how life is. We are responding to our environment. Our internal environment is very much in a strong relationship with our external environment. Our subconscious is programmed by our external environment. And so to just look at the individual and not look at, the family systems and every other facet of their life is a huge problem for me. But here's the deal. Scope of practice is looked at through a very narrow lens from your licensing body. They really can control what a therapist can and can't say, or the depths in which they can get into it with people. So I would share with people like, oh, have you heard of probiotics for your microbiome, for your gut health? Do you know about the microbiome? And I would encourage people to research it, but a lot of people wouldn't. And the thing is that I actually am extremely versed in the gut-brain axis, the microbiome, supplementation, nutrition, functional medicine, and how the microbiome and the vagus nerve and all of that affect our mental health. But I was nervous to educate on that. Like I wouldn't have been able to make recommendations, right? And here's the thing is I wouldn't have felt comfortable just having my client go search on the internet like some random probiotic that might not even work for them because they don't know what they're looking for. If we just throw out breadcrumbs to our clients and they really don't know how to research it or what to look for, and they're not even in a place where they're fully like able to do that, that isn't serving them. And that's the issue of how we have to practice is we get to throw out breadcrumbs. We can make referrals, which there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes that's needed. But if the person can't afford a dietitian and it's not covered by insurance, guess what? They're not going to get the support that they need. And I'm not saying that therapists have to have an expertise in every single thing that contributes to mental health. But my problem with the mental health system is it's just like the medical system. Therapists are not properly trained to actually talk about the whole picture. They don't treat people holistically. It's the same issue that we have with conventional medicine. You go to one doctor, they only look at your hormones. They don't look at your organ functions. They don't look at your neurology. They don't look at your sleep habits. They don't look at all the things, right? They look at the one thing that's within their scope. And this is the problem with conventional medicine. And this is the problem with conventional mental health practices. It's too narrow. They're only looking through one lens. And that's my issue. And that's how the licensing body and the ethics board wants a practitioner to function. And it doesn't allow for people to get a full scope of care. And it doesn't allow for people to fully get to the root. This is my beef. Bond Charge brings you cutting-edge wellness tools like red light therapy, EMF shields, cold therapy, and light therapy glasses, all designed to support your body's natural healing process. Red light therapy is clinically shown to boost mitochondrial function and reduce inflammation. EMF shields help to protect against the effects of everyday radiation exposure from our devices. Blue light blocking glasses are shown to improve sleep and reduce eye strain. I am obsessed with so many of their products. My home is stacked with EMF protectors. I use their red light tools weekly, and I love their light sensitivity glasses. I'm seeing a huge reduction in my migraines. Bond Charge is HSA and FSA eligible, so investing in your health has never been easier. Visit bondcharge.com and use code MHM for 15% off. You can also check the show notes for links and codes. The second thing is that insurance companies don't pay for healing. And so therapists, like we can make lots of recommendations. We can say like, have you ever thought about getting this? Have you ever thought about seeing a dietitian? Have you ever thought about doing somatic work? By the way, all of this is self-education. So I'm sure since I've graduated from grad school, like I graduated from grad school maybe 18 years ago now, maybe 17, I'm sure that the programs have evolved. But I didn't learn anything about the nervous system in grad school. I didn't learn anything about the gut-brain axis. I didn't learn one lick of anything about nutrition and mental health and the relationship, movement and mental health, supplementation and mental health, sunlight and mental health, sleep hygiene and none. Those are all the foundational things for mental health. That is insane to me that I learned none of those things. All of those things are self-taught or me seeking out other education or other courses or other certifications. And so that's how it is with medical doctors. That's even how it is with psychiatrists. We're not given the most foundational tools to support people with their physical and mental health. And insurance companies typically don't pay for those kinds of things either. So some insurance companies will pay for dietitians if it's deemed necessary. A therapist typically can't refer you. Usually, they can refer you, but usually you have to go to your primary care physician and explain to them like, hey, my therapist wants me to go to a dietitian because of this reason, blah, blah, blah. Then the primary care can refer. Unless you have insurance, like really good insurance that doesn't require like a pre-auth or like a referral or whatever, then you have to go kind of jump through all these hoops to get what you need. There are very few modalities that actually help you release, process, and integrate trauma. And I'm not saying that some of these trauma therapies aren't really powerful. I worked with a clinician in nonprofit who had several trauma certifications, and she did very good work with children. But I wouldn't say that the approach actually helped neutralize and integrate the trauma parts. Probably down the road, there's going to be things that these now adults are going to have to do. There's things that are lingering for them, right? Anything that does deep healing like that, like what I do for my family, which is body code, belief code, which neutralizes trauma, removes trapped emotions, removes trapped beliefs, and helps integrate so you become more whole. That's not covered by insurance. These types of modalities are not. The couple of modalities that are EMDR, which is a pretty good modality. I've done EMDR and it definitely helped. Another one is DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. It does not heal your trauma, but it helps you learn how to manage symptoms. It helps with emotion regulation. It helps with distress tolerance, understanding relationships and being able to navigate them in a healthy way, communication. It's very skills-based. I wouldn't say it heals you, but it brings people really far. So there's definitely some modalities that are more powerful than others in helping people make progress and getting closer to healing. But anything that's going to truly actually heal things, insurance won't pay for. And that gets really hard because most people aren't going to go do it unless they have the extra cash or they're willing to make financial sacrifices. They're not going to do it, right? We live in a world where insurance reigns. That's really hard. I used to want to refer families to like equestrian therapy together. Insurance won't cover it. Stuff like that, you guys. The mental health system and the medical system is a system designed to manage symptoms, not heal people at the root. So I had a lot of therapists comment on my reel. They were very upset that I was saying these things. And I think that a big reason why I'm talking about this is not because I don't want people to go to therapy. Like, it's a great first step for becoming aware of what your challenges are and what your patterns are. And maybe if you have a trauma history or you have unhealthy relationships that you don't even realize are unhealthy, like talk therapy and some of these other modalities of therapy can give you incredible tools, but it is not the end all be all and it is not going to heal you. I will die on that hill. I will die on the hill that talk therapy, even DBT therapy, CBT is not going to heal you. They are management tools. They are skills. That is all that it is. This is why therapy can feel like an endless loop. Like, it was really interesting because I took a stance as a therapist, like, we're going to get you skills. We're going to get you to a point where you can make some changes in your life, make some changes in yourself. You can get more aligned. You can feel better. You can start thriving. And then you're going to become independent. You're going to graduate. Like, I was never in the business of keeping people for super long time. I never felt like that served people, right? But I would have people come to me looking for a new therapist because their own therapist retired or moved and they had been in therapy for 13 years, therapy for 20 years, therapy for 5, therapy for 10. And I would think to myself, what the hell have they been doing in therapy this whole time? Because there's no way that any person doesn't have the ability to progress and heal and graduate out of therapy. Like, I truly believe that people can heal. I'd always be so perplexed of why were they in therapy for so freaking long? Like, unless there's cycles being perpetuated that their therapist can't help them identify, what is going on? This is ridiculous. And I have a problem with chronic, long-term therapy situations. It means that they're not getting the support that they need. It's not a them problem. They might have things that they still need to change, or work through or heal through, but it's a system problem. I find it very problematic. It can be like an endless loop. There's many things that therapists can't take a deep dive on. Either they don't have the training or they don't feel comfortable or they don't want to be working out of scope. unless they're very specifically trained or they feel comfortable, they can't always lead people to the things that are actually going to get to the root to heal. And that's a problem. They have to use insurance approved treatments. They have to use things that are considered within scope, even if they have qualifications outside of that. The things that are approved and the things that are in scope are talk therapy, CBT, DBT, EMDR, tapping and medication and like, hey, go check this out. Hey, go research that. Mental health is still very limited, you guys. Most of the people who are doing insanely innovative work that are getting to the root of people's issues, that are helping them heal, breaking subconscious patterns, many of those things you have to pay out of pocket for, not because people don't want to heal, because insurance will not freaking cover it. It is an insurance problem. It's a systemic problem, and it's horrible. In my reel, I was really talking about the system, right? Not the therapist. Like, I'm not attacking therapists, although I do think that there's some therapists that, well, in this comment I'm going to share with you, brought me back to my whole point is that there's some complacency. The other piece is that they have to diagnose you. I freaking hated that from day one. I'm so thankful that I went to a program where we actually very openly spoke about how diagnoses are not helpful, labels are not helpful, but that it's a system that we have to work within, because family therapy is very systemic. It's very holistic. It's very whole picture, right? It was very much like, we don't just label a person. We always erred on the side of caution with diagnoses, because this is the other thing is diagnoses follow you. You could get anything subpoenaed at any time, and that label is going to follow you. That label could be weaponized against you. And yeah, I'm saying this, and there could be some therapists who listen to this and get really pissed off that I'm saying that, but it's the fucking truth. It's not okay. Insurance requires a diagnosis to pay for any kind of therapy. So I always took the path of least harm, and I would milk the adjustment diagnosis for as long as I could. I haven't diagnosed anybody and like written a clinical note, a progress note for 2 or 3 years now. But back when I was having to do that, an adjustment disorder technically is only able to last for 6 months because you're adjusting to your circumstances. I really had to be creative because I didn't want to give any kid or any teen or labels that, number one, weren't true, and number two, could follow them. It was interesting because I'd have a lot of people come into my office and would say things to me like, I have borderline personality disorder. So, that would be like their frame of reference for all these things in their life. And then we'd unpack all this stuff and I'd be like, listen, you have trauma. Okay. Like you don't have a personality disorder. You might be behaving in ways and communicating in ways that look like that label, that are sabotaging your life, but that's because you have trauma. Maybe you had a parent that didn't allow you to say your feelings, and the only time they listened was when you screamed on the top of your lungs. That's a learned behavior. That's a trauma pattern. That's not your personality. You can undo that. Diagnoses can be very dangerous. They will not cover your treatment if you don't have a diagnosis. That means no paycheck. So therapists are forced into diagnosing, whether they believe in it or not. And I was one of those therapists. I diagnosed even though I didn't really believe in it. This is a huge problem in my eyes. There's an agenda there. The other thing is that there's a lot of systemic issues with people being able to get what they need. The system is very overrun. Depending on the severity of what's going on with the family or the mental health or whatever, there's other services that people can get and create like a team of services. There would just be so much waiting. Families and kids would be in these holding patterns because there's only so many people, and you might have to hop around and get multiple referrals. And I used to have to sign off on things, and then the psychiatrist would used to have to sign off on things, and it can be very complicated for people to actually get things that they need. There are a lot of therapists that will recommend that people go see a psychiatrist, right? Like there's a lot of therapists for medication. You guys know that I'm very much against that. I believe that people can, I would say 90% of people can heal themselves with the right tools and the right knowledge, obviously with support. That I don't think the majority of people in this world need mental health medication. I think that they need to actually do probably many other things before they ever even set foot in a psychiatry office. And so when you have therapists who are more prone to saying like, hey, you should go see a psychiatrist, right? Or, hey, you should go see your GM about getting some anti-anxiety medication, all of that influences people. When you're trusting somebody, you're going to them week after week and you're telling them all the intimate details of your life. And then they say to you, like, have you ever considered anti-anxiety medication? They're using their authority to suggest something that they believe in. I have a problem with that because there's so much side effects. And I think that it's a very complex thing. Now, I was never a therapist that suggested that. I never suggested that. That wasn't a conversation that I would have for people. And in fact, there were many people who would come to me and say that a GM suggested medication, and we would talk through their fears and hesitations. And I would recommend that they do their research because there's a lot of people who don't want to go on medication, but they feel like it's the only option because they don't know that there's a million other things out there that could help them because we're not allowed to talk about it. Like, that's the whole freaking point, is that we're not allowed to talk about it. I say all these things, right, in this reel. Several therapists were very upset. They feel like I'm stigmatizing therapy even more, causing more mistrust, all this stuff, right? I want to read this to you. So there was one therapist who was like, well, this isn't necessarily true. Like, we can share about this and share about that. And there was one therapist that said, well, I always emphasize that taking care of your physical health is just as important as taking care of your mental health. And so my question is like, well, how do you help them do that? Because that's a very vague statement. And that's the whole freaking point of what I'm saying. It's vague. Treatment is vague. If you're just like, oh, well, you need to take care of your physical health just as much as your mental health because your physical health contributes to your mental health. Okay, but how? What do I need to look at? Sleep, circadian rhythm, minerals, sun exposure, what type of people I'm in a relationship with and the dynamics of that, my job, looking at my hormones, depending on your age and your sex, environmental toxins like mold, parasites, just on the fundamental, like, do you know what processed foods do to people's mental health? I feel like we are doing people a disservice as therapists, not having either, if we have that knowledge, not sharing or not educating ourselves outside of our scope. It is a huge freaking problem. It's just like doctors. It's just like conventional medicine. You guys, I went to a neurologist once. She'd been my neurologist for a long time. I told her I was doing cranial sacral therapy. Our cranial, it's our head. Our sacral is our sacrum, right? And she didn't know what it was. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody who specializes in the head, in the brain, in the nervous system doesn't know what cranial sacral therapy is. What is going on here? And it's not that she had to be an expert or anything, but it's like, what do you mean? Like, you specialize in the brain. That's what I'm talking about, where we just like go to school, we get our little education and we get our certifications, and then we can only help people from the very narrow lens in which we were trained in. And if we are not a professional that's expansive and gets more education, we are not going to holistically and fully and wholly help anybody. And that's the BS that I'm calling on the mental health system. And sometimes therapists are the problem and sometimes they're not, and they're just trying to navigate within a system that is very limited and very broken. After like a little bit of back and forth, very respectful back and forth, she says to me, and this is crazy because she was upset at my comment, right? Or I don't know if she was upset, but she was like, that's not necessarily true, and kind of like debating me. And then at the end, she goes, I agree. Unfortunately, most people go through insurance, and the people who would really benefit can't pay out of pocket. We always have to work within the confines of a broken system. And I will tell you something, that just set my hair on fire. I was just like, isn't that the fucking point of what I just said? Why are we as therapists okay with working within the confines of a broken system? And I'm not saying that everybody is me, okay? Like, I get it. Not everybody can be like, peace out on being a therapist. Not everybody wants to. I felt like a fraud. The last couple of years of practicing, I really felt like a fraud because I had all this knowledge and I had all this information and I had been on my own profound healing journey, and I was like actually deeply healing. And I felt like a fraud because there was so much of it that I couldn't share or educate my clients sitting right in front of me, and I watched them suffering or like keep banging their head against the wall, doing the same pattern. And I felt like I couldn't share certain things because it wasn't within my scope. And that comment that this therapist made to me, that's what I'm saying. Why are we okay with it, right? Why are we as therapists, as professionals, okay with, well, we just got to do the best we can? How is that do no harm to the client? It's not do no harm. It's doing more harm than good, in my opinion. It's a huge reason why I stopped practicing so that I could really just say what I wanted to say and say the things that I knew. But I also really struggled with this idea that like there was a lot of complacent practitioners that have this very point of view, like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It's a broken system. We're doing the best we can. When you know that there's like, I don't know, 5 or 10 other things that you could be utilizing or you could be helping them explore for true healing, that's to me very unethical. It's very lazy. It's really sad. Like it makes me really sad. I say that with a lot of respect and compassion as well for therapists because I stayed and practiced for 13 years. And probably by year 2 or 3, I started having this inner voice going, there's more to this. And it was like, I would say I probably shoved it down because it felt too big. I was terrified. I'm like, how do you take something like this on? It's a system and it's broken. It's been like this for a really long time. I don't have all the answers, you guys, because letting your license go and doing what I am doing is not for everybody. And maybe I didn't even have to let my license go, but it made me feel safer to be completely unfiltered and unhinged, right? So that's just me. But I get it. Like, I get why therapists feel challenged in this area. We can't carry the world on our shoulders, but it has to start somewhere. It has to start with what you can do. Taking small steps to more transparency with clients in regards to what things can be done. More steps to working or advocating or lobbying with licensing bodies and ethics boards around widening scope of practice with the right credentials, whether it's like a certification or whatever. I don't think enough of that is being done. So we are doing a lot of people a huge disservice. And my service in this area is this podcast. But I felt really compelled to come on here and share that. I have had very, very valuable talk therapy experiences in my lifetime that I wouldn't trade for anything. When I went to college, I had a profound experience with a therapist who I saw for the whole first and I think second year, transitioning into college, moving away from my family, finally having enough space to really process through my childhood. And I would do check-ins with her throughout my college years, right? She had a profound impact. She helped me find my voice. She helped me find my discernment. She helped me feel seen. And that in itself was healing. When I went to grad school, I had to examine my own family dynamics for the first year because I wasn't seeing clients, right? I didn't have anybody to practice with yet. We were practicing on each other and dissecting our own lives for all of our clinical papers. That was a lot for me. That was so much more was coming up, having this education and then processing and looking at my family dynamics. And there were difficult family dynamics going on at the time with my mom and her boyfriend at the time. I was getting ready to get married. I went and I saw a therapist for 6 months. And therapists can be very, very supportive in life transitions and teasing things out and processing things out loud. When I got divorced suddenly, unexpectedly, I went and saw a therapist. And then I had a clinical therapist. I probably did that with that therapist for 6 to 8 months, just again, processing and helping me navigate all these unknowns and things like that. Therapy has its place. Therapy can be very profound. I think where it gets dangerous is that sometimes we promote therapy as healing. You can't talk your way through every wound. You just can't. And some of it actually re-traumatizes. I feel like it's my duty to share these things. It's my duty to be really honest. There are incredible therapists out there. There's incredible talk therapists. There's incredible DBT therapists, EMDR therapists, somatic therapists. Even CBT has its place, for certain things to help people learn skills. But at the end of the day, talk therapy and meds aren't going to heal anybody. And sometimes it actually makes it worse. And until the status quo gets changed, this is what you're dealing with. The very point of this is ask questions, interview your therapist, ask them their stance on things, ask them their stance on medication, Ask them about their track record. What's the average that people see them? If they're telling you that their clients average years, red flag. You don't want to see a therapist that sees people for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. That tells me that they are not helping people move forward in a profound way in their life and their healing process. And here's the other thing is that like, if you as a person who's not a clinician or a practitioner listening to this, if you are somebody who's looking for healing and you're like, I don't have a lot of money, right? I get it. I've been there. I've been in bad financial places for extended periods of time in my life. My encouragement to you would be to get in some therapy to help you and save your money to go do a different modality that's going to actually help clear and neutralize and integrate the patterns or the trauma or whatever it is. It's worth it. Anything that I've done that has truly brought me healing. I am still healing, but like I am healed from many horrific things in my life I had to pay for. And that's the part of the system that's broken, right? But I want to encourage you is like, don't let a broken system keep you stuck in unhealthy patterns, in poor mental health. There's also so many things you can do for free. And I can't get into it in this podcast. I will do another episode just sharing my journey of all the things I've done to heal that I did for free and that I paid for. And you can always DM me with questions. And I'm happy to do podcast episodes on questions. There's many things that you can do. In fact, there's several things you can do free before you even have to pay for anything, before you even have to go to talk therapy. My battle cry is educate yourself. Go on the Google, like go searching, learn, empower yourself with some basic knowledge so that you can start taking your healing into your own hands. Don't put your healing solely in the hands of a therapist, a psychiatrist, GM. It's fine if you want to have a relationship with those types of practitioners, but don't hand it over. Many people don't even know what I just said about how there's several lenses for therapists that are taught, right? Like I told you guys that I came from the systemic lens and the family therapy lens and the holistic lens and the like don't diagnose as much as you can lens. Whereas again, there's many other licensed professionals that come from a completely different lens. And we're all working on the same thing. That's really important for you to understand. It's about informed consent. And that's part of the issue. There's informed consent and then there's informed consent. That's what this podcast is all about, is informing you so that you know what you're consenting to. I hope that this episode I'm like really fired up right now, you guys. I want to record another episode on all the things that I did to heal, free versus paid. If this resonated with you, if you feel empowered in some way, if you got some aha from this, please don't hesitate to share this episode on your social media. Share it with a friend. We have to get the word out. We have to empower other people to really become a much more active participant in their own healing and take more responsibility for their healing and know that they can. Just knowing that you can is the first step. You can figure out the other steps little by little along the way. So I hope this brought you hope, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.